she's just a cashier. She can't even pay rent, my cousin Marco said, loud enough for the whole room to hear. Everyone laughed. I stood there in my work uniform, holding a paper bag with a sandwich I couldn't afford. Then my uncle leaned back in his chair and said, she's a waste of space. I felt my stomach drop, my heart pounding. No one said anything. Not even me, and that's when the bank owner stood up. He looked around the room, then pointed at me and said, actually, she owns this entire floor. Marco's smile vanished. Uncle Ron froze, and for the first time that day, the room went completely silent. My name is Zyra Wynn. I'm 26, and I work full-time as a cashier at Fairmart, a local grocery store just outside Philly. Most days, I'm up before the sun. I catch the 5:10 bus, wear the same gray uniform I've had for 2 years, and stand on my feet for 8, sometimes 10 hours. I smile at customers, even the rude ones. I bag their eggs carefully and answer questions like, where's the peanut butter? As if my job depends on it, because it does. I rent a tiny studio apartment above a pizza place. The ceiling leaks when it rains, and the heater makes this strange clicking sound at night that keeps me awake. But it's what I can afford, and honestly, I'm just grateful to have a place of my own. I don't complain much. I don't post about my struggles. I just work, save what I can, and mind my business. My family, though, they see me as a failure, especially Marco, my cousin. He's 2 years older than me and works for a big tech company. Makes good money, drives a silver BMW, always talking about stocks and crypto like he invented them. Then there's my uncle, Ron, my mom's older brother. He never misses a chance to remind me that I should have gone into nursing like a smart girl. He says it like clockwork at every family gathering. They've made it clear I'm the disappointment. The one who stayed small, but what they don't know is that I've been planning something quietly for over a year. I've been saving every extra dollar. Skipping takeout, cutting cable, selling old clothes. I even picked up extra shifts when coworkers called out, and 6 months ago, I made a choice. One that would change everything, but back then, I was still just the cashier girl in their eyes. So when Uncle Ron sent out an invite to a fancy family brunch, inside the new cafe at the bank downtown, I didn't want to go. I knew what it would be like. Expensive food, fake smiles, backhanded compliments. Another chance for them to show off and for me to sit quietly in the corner, but something told me to show up anyway. Maybe it was pride. Maybe it was something deeper. Either way, I went straight from my shift. Still in uniform. Still tired. Still me, and that's when everything started. I walked into the cafe trying not to feel out of place, but it was impossible not to. The floors were polished marble, and the lights were soft and golden, the kind of glow that makes expensive things look even more expensive. Everything smelled like roasted coffee and lavender, and there were fresh white flowers at every table. This wasn't a regular cafe, it was upscale, quiet, meant for people who wore tailored suits and talked business over brunch. And then there was me, in my grocery store uniform. Name tag still pinned on, shoes worn from the long shift I'd just finished. I clutched my phone in one hand and a paper bag with a protein bar in the other. I hadn't had time to change, and honestly, I didn't even have anything fancy to change into. I spotted my family right away. They were gathered around a long table near the front window. Marco was there, of course, sitting with his legs crossed, sipping on what looked like a $9 latte. His blazer was sharp, and his sunglasses were still tucked into the front of his shirt like he'd just stepped off a runway. Uncle Ron sat at the head of the table, laughing loud enough for everyone nearby to hear. His wife, Aunt Denise, gave me a small wave when she saw me, probably the only person who didn't completely ignore me at these things. I walked over, trying to stay calm, hoping no one would say anything about my clothes or my job. I should have known better. As soon as I reached the table, Marco looked me up and down and smirked. Wow, he said. Didn't know they let employees eat here. There was a pause, then laughter. Even some of the younger cousins giggled, watching for my reaction. I forced a smile and pulled out the empty chair at the end of the table. I was used to this. I'd been the family joke for years. Uncle Ron leaned back in his chair, still holding his coffee. Zyra, you're still working at that grocery store, right? What's it been? 3 years now. 4, I said quietly, hoping the conversation would move on. 4, he repeated, raising his eyebrows. At your age? That's a shame. You should have listened to your mom. She wanted you to go to college. She did, I replied, trying not to sound defensive. Things didn't work out that way. He laughed again. Things don't work out when you don't try hard enough. You're wasting your time, girl. You're smart. You could have been something. A few others murmured in agreement, nodding like they were talking about the weather. I stayed silent. I'd heard it all before, every holiday, every birthday dinner, every group chat I stayed quiet in. I was always the one who didn't measure up. No degree. No house. No big job title. Then Marco leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table. So what's your plan, Zaira? Just gonna bag groceries till you're 50? The table burst into laughter again. Even Aunt Denise chuckled this time. I didn't answer. I couldn't. My hands were clenched so tight in my lap I could feel my nails digging into my skin. One of Marco's friends, some guy he brought along who clearly didn't know me, whispered to him, "Is she part of the wait staff or something?" And Marco laughed even harder. That one stung, not because he was wrong, I looked like staff, but because he said it so casually, like I didn't even exist. I tried to focus on breathing. In and out. Slow and quiet. Then Uncle Ron leaned in again. Zaira, I say this with love. You need to stop being a burden. Get serious about your life. You're a grown woman still living like a teenager. Rent, cashier shifts, no savings, no plan. You're better than this. Or at least, you should be. The word burden hit me harder than I expected. I looked around the table. No one stood up for me. No one said a word. They just stared, waiting to see if I'd snap or cry or defend myself, but I didn't do any of those things. Instead, I stood up. Slowly, calmly. I picked up my bag and phone, and I smiled. You know what? I'll be right back, I said. Marco gave me a look. Where are you going? Break room. More laughter. I turned and walked across the cafe toward the front desk. Near the elevators. My heart was beating fast, but not from shame this time. From adrenaline. I wasn't going to cry in the bathroom. I wasn't running away. I was going to remind myself who I really was. The receptionist looked up as I approached. She was young, probably close to my age, and had a headset on. She gave me a polite smile. Hi, I said, clearing my throat. Could you let Mr. Corbin know that Zaira Wynn is here to see him? She hesitated for a second, probably confused by my uniform. But then she glanced down at the computer screen, typed my name, and her eyes widened. Yes, of course. One moment. Miss Wynn. She stood up immediately and made a call. That moment changed everything, and as I turned back to look at the table where my family sat laughing, I finally understood something. They didn't know me. Not really. They only saw what I looked like. What I earned. What I wore, but none of that mattered anymore, because someone else was about to tell them the truth. I stood there near the front desk, trying to steady my breathing. My heart was racing, but I wasn't nervous, I was focused. I had made my choice. I wasn't going to sit there and take it anymore. Not the jokes. Not the pity. Not the lies they told themselves about who I was and who I could be. I watched as the receptionist finished her call and gave me a small, respectful nod. Mr. Corbin will be down in just a moment, Miss Wynn, she said, her voice more formal. This time Miss Wynn, she didn't know me as just a cashier. She knew my name in a different context, one tied to property documents and contracts and ownership. The name printed on the paperwork for the top floors of this very building. I stood tall, even in my plain work shoes and my wrinkled uniform. The fabric might have smelled like coffee and sweat, but I didn't care anymore. I wasn't hiding. I was ready to be seen. Across the cafe, I could still hear the echoes of laughter from my family's table. They were probably still joking. Still snickering, still enjoying the feeling of being better than me. I could picture Marco leaning back in his chair, showing off his smartwatch and making some empty comment about how hard he worked to earn his spot. Uncle Ron probably had another one of his speeches ready about how I'd let my mother down by not chasing some safe, traditional path. They had no idea what was coming, and the thing is, I hadn't planned it like this. I never intended to reveal anything at this brunch. I didn't need to show off. I didn't care about being seen as wealthy or powerful. I just wanted to live quietly, build something for myself, and maybe prove, if only to me, that I was more than what they thought. But sometimes, you reach a point where silence becomes too heavy. Where letting people talk down to you starts to feel like you're agreeing with them, and I wasn't going to agree anymore. The elevator doors opened, and out stepped Mr. Corbin. He looked just like he always did, sharp gray suit, leather briefcase in hand, polished shoes, and a calm, commanding presence. He wasn't loud like my uncle or flashy like Marco. He was the kind of man who didn't need to say much to be respected. He spotted me right away and smiled. "Miss Wynne," he said, stepping toward me and extending his hand. "Pleasure to see you again. I wasn't expecting you today. Are you here for a meeting?" I shook his hand, and for a second, I forgot we were in public. I nodded. "Not a meeting exactly. More like a family moment." He raised an eyebrow. Curious but polite. I could tell he sensed the tension. "Well," he said, motioning toward the seating area, "shall we say hello to your guests?" I gave him a small, grateful smile. "Yes. Let's." We walked side by side back toward the cafe table. The room quieted almost instantly when they saw us. Marco turned his head first, his smirk fading as soon as he noticed Mr. Corbin. Uncle Ron straightened up, trying to figure out what was going on. The rest of the family looked confused, maybe even a little concerned. It wasn't every day the executive of the bank casually walked up to a brunch table to speak to one of their OWN.Mr. Corbin stopped right at the edge of the table and looked around with a polite nod. Then, without hesitation, he turned to me and spoke clearly, his voice calm but firm. "Miss Wynne, I wanted to thank you again for your continued partnership. The renovation plans for your commercial floors have been approved. We'll begin construction next month. Our team will coordinate with you for the final walkthroughs." Silence, total silence. Marco blinked. Uncle Ron opened his mouth slightly, like he wanted to say something, but no sound came out. Mr. Corbin turned to the group. "For those who may not know, Miss Wynne is the majority stakeholder for the top 3 floors of this building. That includes the cafe you're dining in today." He looked at Marco and my uncle, then added without a trace of sarcasm, "We're honored to work with her." Then he gave me a nod and walked away, leaving the table in stunned silence. I turned to face them. My family. The people who had laughed at me less than 10 minutes ago. The ones who thought they knew everything about who I was, what I could or couldn't become. I didn't feel angry. I didn't feel smug. I felt clear. Solid. Whole. Marco stared at me like I was a stranger. Uncle Ron looked like he'd just swallowed a lemon. I looked down at the same paper bag I'd been holding all morning. It still had my protein bar inside. Still wrinkled. Still simple, but now it meant something different, because the girl they mocked, the one they called a burden, a failure, a cashier with no future, was the same girl who now owned the floor beneath their feet, and they had no idea how to respond to that. For a long moment, no one said anything. They just stared at me like I had grown wings or dropped out of the sky. My Uncle Ron looked frozen, his mouth slightly open, his coffee halfway to his lips. Marco blinked so many times I wondered if he was trying to convince himself that what he just heard wasn't real. I didn't rush to explain. I didn't speak to fill the silence. I let the truth hang there like thunder after a lightning strike. Let them feel the weight of it. Mr. Corbin's words had landed like a bomb. Miss Wynne is the majority stakeholder for the top 3 floors of this building. That includes the cafe you're dining in today. I had been invisible to them for so long that the idea of me owning anything, let alone part of a bank, didn't even register at first. But I watched it settle in Marco's eyes, the shock, the confusion, then the panic. Like he was flipping through every memory he had of me and realizing he'd gotten the entire story wrong. Uncle Ron finally cleared his throat. What did he mean by stakeholder? His voice sounded uncertain now, cautious. So different from the arrogant tone he'd used just minutes before. I looked at him calmly. "It means I own these floors. I invested in the property last year. Mr. Corbin's firm manages the building, but I'm one of the people who paid for its redevelopment. This cafe? The offices upstairs? The rental space being built next door? It's all part of the portfolio." The table went dead silent again. I continued, not to brag, but to be clear. I partnered with a small real estate group through a connection of my mom's. I put in everything I had, my savings, the money I got after she passed, even my emergency fund. I didn't tell anyone because I didn't feel the need to prove myself. Marco let out a short, sharp breath and finally spoke. Wait. You're telling me you've been working at a grocery store and buying buildings on the side? His voice had lost its edge. It sounded more like disbelief than sarcasm. Now that I nodded. Yes. I still work there. I like my job. It's honest work. But that doesn't mean I've been standing still. I looked directly at him when I said that. The truth is, I could have quit my cashier job 6 months ago when the investment went through. I could have bought nicer clothes, moved to a bigger place, started showing off. But I didn't. Because that wasn't what mattered to me. I wasn't chasing status. I was chasing freedom, real freedom. And now, I had it. Uncle Ron looked uncomfortable. He shifted in his seat, then gave a weak chuckle. Why didn't you tell us? I tilted my head. Would it have mattered? You already decided what I was. Every time I came to a family dinner, you told me I was lazy. A disappointment. A waste. You didn't ask what I was working on. You just assumed. He opened his mouth, then closed it again. No one laughed anymore. Aunt Denise looked at me quietly, her expression unreadable. I couldn't tell if she was impressed, ashamed, or both. One of my younger cousins looked at me with wide eyes like she was seeing me for the first time. I took a deep breath. I'm not angry. I'm not here to rub anything in. I just want you to know that the person you mocked all these years wasn't weak. I was building something. And just because I didn't do it your way doesn't mean I was failing. Marco finally looked down at his empty plate. He didn't say another word. It wasn't about revenge. I wasn't interested in turning the tables just to humiliate them the way they had humiliated me. I didn't need them to grovel or apologize. I just needed to reclaim the truth. For so long, I had swallowed their words. Let them label me. Let them measure my worth by my paycheck or my job title. But now, I didn't have to, because the power they thought they held over me was gone. I stood tall, still in my cashier uniform, and felt more powerful than I ever had in my life. Not because I owned a building, but because I had finally stopped shrinking to fit their version of who I was. The best part? I didn't need their approval. I never did. I turned toward the elevator, ready to leave. I had said what I needed to say. As I walked away, I heard nothing behind me. No jokes. No laughter. Just the quiet sound of realization settling into the room. Let them sit with it. Let them wonder how they missed what was right in front of them. Let them realize that the girl they dismissed as just a cashier had already passed them by. The cool air of the elevator hit my face the moment the doors closed behind me. It was quiet inside, and for the first time all day, I felt like I could finally breathe. Not just breathe like catching my breath after a long shift, but breathe like letting go of something that had been sitting on my chest for years. I didn't cry. I didn't smile either. I just stood there, looking at my reflection in the polished walls of the elevator. Same face. Same name tag. Same tired eyes. But everything felt different now. Walking out of that cafe wasn't just about leaving a brunch early. It was about walking away from an identity they had forced on me. For so long, I had been the girl who never made it. The one who didn't go to college, who worked at a grocery store, who wasted her potential. I let them say it. I let them believe it. Because arguing felt pointless, and explaining myself felt exhausting. But in that moment, I realized I never owed them an explanation. I never owed anyone that. When I stepped outside onto the busy sidewalk, the sun was higher in the sky than when I had arrived. I could hear traffic and people and the noise of the city moving on with its day. No one knew what had just happened. Inside. To the world, I was just a girl in a work uniform walking out of a bank building, but to me, it felt like freedom. That day changed me, not because of the money, or the recognition, or even the look on Marco's face when the truth came out. It changed me because I finally stood up for myself, in my own quiet way. I didn't yell. I didn't try to prove anything through insults or revenge. I just told the truth. And sometimes, the truth is loud enough all on its own. Later that evening, I sat by my window in my tiny apartment, eating dinner alone. The ceiling still leaked when it rained. The radiator still clanked. Nothing had physically changed, but I had. I wasn't ashamed of this place. It had been my shelter while I saved. It had been my space while I grew. It had seen my struggle. And now it would see me through the next chapter. I thought about my mom a lot that night. She used to tell me, you don't have to scream to be strong. You don't have to be loud to be powerful. I didn't fully understand what she meant back then, but I do now. She saw something in me that I hadn't always seen in myself. She believed that quiet girls could build empires too, just in their own way, in their own time. Over the next few weeks, I got messages from some of my relatives. A text from Aunt Denise saying she was proud of me. A voice memo from Marco that started with, "Hey, just wanted to say," but I didn't listen to the rest. I didn't need closure from them. I didn't need validation. I already had everything I needed. Some of them asked why I kept it a secret, why I never shared what I was building. I never gave a long answer. I just told them I was working, and I didn't have time to explain things to people who weren't listening in the first place. I still work at the store. Not because I have to, but because I want to, for now. I like being around regular people. I like being grounded. I like remembering where I started. The truth is, wealth doesn't change your character. If anything, it shows it more clearly. And I never want to become the kind of person who laughs at someone because of their uniform. What I learned is this: you don't have to announce every step you take. You don't have to convince people you're going somewhere. Just go. Let your work speak when the time is right. Let your actions tell the story. And when the moment comes, stand tall, not for them, but for yourself. I used to think power meant speaking louder than everyone else. Now I know it means standing in your truth even when no one believes you. Even when they laugh. Even when they call you a waste, because someday, you might walk into a room where everyone underestimates you, until someone with real power stands up, points at you, and says, "Actually, she owns this entire floor." And in that moment, you won't need to say a word. They'll finally see what you've known all along.